Hey guys, so I'm going to spend a few minutes just sort of going over where we are in the work for this week because we are starting a new unit this week. So we are beginning, I'm just going to click on calendar. So we are beginning unit 3, which is contributing to the conversation. So we're going to be spending a good bit of time kind of transitioning from the annotated bibliography and getting your digital essay off the ground. As I said, with the annotated bibliography, it's two parts of the same project. The annotated bibliography, which creates a picture of resources that are text from the whole conversation. Kind of the 10 best, most diverse things that you have that represent current events and scholars and background and different perspectives. The digital essay is more of a kind of you stepping up to the table and adding something. So it doesn't necessarily have to directly answer your question, because your question was more of a jumping off point to kind of name what the conversation is. You can, when we start getting into this essay, you are welcome to be specific, offer a solution, try to just draw attention to it and get people to care. You can kind of narrow in any way that you want to, as long as it's based off of the same. You're adding to this conversation. So we're kind of making that transition. And no, we don't finish the whole annotated bibliography. We kind of get to a point where you have a good solid draft and you can work independently and kind of get some feedback on your own. A lot of times, because when people get to where they have about 7 or 8 sources, it's really difficult to tell what exactly they still need until they start writing the paper. So I find that people have a really good sense once they've gotten that far into the anti-bibliography of what they're doing with it, and as they get sources for the digital essay, they can fill in what they feel like they're missing at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and click on week 9 and go through this a little bit. So here is kind of what we're working on. It is sort of what I would call, and I did label it, kind of a review and transition week. We are doing some review work, just some reflection on kind of the first half of this semester. I did ask you first this week to review the video that I posted for Studio 3, which is kind of just a focused look at scholarly articles. We said we were going to do those later in the research, because sometimes you have to have a little bit of information about the topic under your feet before you can really know what to do with those scholarly articles and read into them, because they can be pretty difficult to read, and it's not a reading issue, it's being familiar with that particular discipline issue. Even an expert, I'm an expert in, or we can consider myself an expert in writing topics, but I would really struggle with a chemistry-based scholarly article, because it's not my field. I'm not going to know the terminology that's in those articles. So it is sort of a going through that a little bit. So you're going to look at a couple of videos about what the parts of the scholarly article are as a genre, how to recognize them, how to read them, look at a sample, and then practice with your own scholarly article for your annotated bibliography. You are doing a midterm review quiz. There's 2 parts. The first one is more of a multiple choice, and there's some bonus questions, and the second part is kind of a short answer. And again, you need to take each once by Thursday, but you can revise them as you need to and ask questions and things like that. These aren't necessarily tests or things you have to study for. You're welcome to use your notes in your notebook. That's kind of what they're for. Look through videos, email me and say, I'm really having a hard time with this one. Can you explain what this means? These are for practice and review, not necessarily assessment. So it's not like test. And then you're going to complete a midterm reflection activity in your notebook. The last part of the week, you have a couple of things to do that are more here are some things we're working on. There is a complete a research reflection activity, which is pretty brief. It just asks you to kind of draw out your own roundtable conversation model, what are the voices in the conversation, and then write a quick reflection, kind of figuring out where you are. I ask you to look through the review and submission processes and details for the annotated bibliography, and I'll kind of go through that again in a minute. You're going to look at the digital essay assignment sheet and take the quiz, so you can kind of be thinking about that as you're finishing up this last part of the annotated bibliography. you're going to be working on Studio 3, working on your annotated bibliography, because on the 12th, you're going to submit that draft with the 8 sources, with your introduction, with all that fun stuff. So I'm going to go through things just a little bit. So I do have a screencast video of Studio 3 first. After that is your midterm quiz, part 1, part 2. I'm not going to go through much about those. I think you know how quizzes work. This is your midterm, what I call writing theory, revisit, and reflection. So as you go through this video, it's going to ask you to kind of do a third or a second revisit. So you, at the beginning of the semester, did a little bit with your writing theory. Like this is one of the first things that we did, and then we did a revisit kind of soon after that, and now we're doing another one. So there are some parts of this. Let me actually pull up the presentation. So this is the presentation. I'm just kind of pulling it up in my Google Slides that you're going to be doing. So the first thing is you're going to be doing this in your notebook. You're going to do what I call a word vomit, where I give you some concepts we talked about the first half of the semester, and you're going to write about which things like stand out to you, like you remember learning or struggling with or working on, having questions about. You're going to underline some things that stood out to you, and then you're going to do a revisit again of your writing theory, with the goal being to add some specific things that we've covered into that writing theory. And then the next part is seeing if you can use some terminology from the class and add in 2 key concepts that relate to things you're already talking about. So if you're already talking a lot about the importance of research, to add in critical reading. If you're talking a lot about having to think about your audience, then that would be rhetorical knowledge. So just some ideas there. The last thing is to pull some examples from work that you've done. So assignments, feedback notes. So to pull some work, or sort of make examples from that stand out to you. A good way to think about it is to either choose things that relate to stuff you already talked about in your writing theory. If you want to just pull 4 like artifacts, that's fine. But one of the things I note in this video is the goal is to make some connections. So if you're notice that you didn't talk a lot about research in your writing theory, and you choose your most significant examples of work as being things that are very research related, then you might want to add something like that to your writing theory. I'm going to go on to the next thing. Okay, so the research reflection, and this actually kind of starts session 2, so a little bit later in the week. And this is just sort of seeing where you are with your research, having done a couple of annotations and maybe having at least some ideas for what some of your other sources are. Earlier in this semester, we went over this model. So I added these examples onto the page. That model conversation when we were talking about Burke's Parlor, and that representing like how research is a conversation. So all of these people kind of at the table talking about this issue and who these voices would be. And we used violent video games and teens as kind of our topic. And we went over who some of the voices would be. We talked about like what their stake would be in that issue, like why they would care, what kind of expertise they might be bringing to the table, what kind of documents you might find these perspectives in. So one of the things that you are going to be doing is kind of drawing this out for yourself. And I'd say in your notebook, you can make it as kind of a list. You can create a visual map like this, but the goal is to get 5 groups or voices that would be kind of at your table talking about this issue. I don't mean opinions, I mean groups of people. So not like people who agree, people who don't agree. I mean like child psychologists, teachers, news reporters, people who have different types of expertise. Beside each group, you're going to know what their stake is, like why they're in this conversation. So you have that idea. And I did include the video of when I went over this in case you need that for some extra help. And then you're going to write a little reflection on that. Like, what does it show about where you are with your research? Just so you can kind of see where where some holes might be. The next thing that you're going to be doing is looking over your annotated bib submission requirements. And I kind of want to go over that here. So a couple of things is you have some options for how to receive feedback. So what you're going to be submitting is your annotated bib document that has a formatted title, has those categories or sections to organize your sources from the assignment sheet, and your introduction. You're going to have a minimum of 8 annotations that include bibliographic info, so the actual bibliographic citation in MLA or APA, and then the annotations for each source. Please kind of make revisions. Remember, this is a super formal genre. Formal genres have a lot more kind of rigid expectations, so you want to make sure you've paid attention to the grading rubric and the videos that walk through like how to do those things and show you some student samples and stuff like that. Then you're going to submit your link. So you're going to be submitting your link for this. What you're going to be doing to choose is, here are your options. 1, everybody gets a tentative rubric grade. It's going to be a little lower than it will be at the end of the term because it's going to reflect having 2 missing annotations if you have 8. But what it will let you see is where you are with some of those other kind of skills that we're working on and where you might need to make some revisions. For feedback, if you want to request something more than just a grading rubric, you can do one of 2 things. First, if you just want some written feedback via Canvas, you're going to be writing a reflection at the bottom of your annotated bib draft. So when you submit that link, I'll be able to see your draft and your reflection at the bottom, and then here's the list of prompts that you're going to be answering. I'm going to publish that. You must submit this in order to get the written feedback. You'll only get a rubric response, a set of numbers, if you don't submit the reflection, because what this does is it's really difficult to look at just your list of sources and tell what's going on behind the scenes and where you are and what you really need help with. So this sort of gives me some actual context for where you are so that I can be more helpful with that. The other option is here. You're going to sign up. I'm going to include a link here for the form. I'm still working on that schedule to select a face-to-face time. So I'll have your link that I can pull up in our conference and we'll be able to talk. So we'll talk about where you are, what you're having trouble with. I'll give you some kind of written feedback and talk to you about it right there face-to-face. One of the bonuses, I guess, for the face-to-face is that, I mean, I know that this kind of feedback isn't for everybody, so you can choose one or the other. Face-to-face sessions do tend to come back a little faster because you have an appointment, and we sometimes can cover a little bit more because you're able to like ask questions on the spot, and while I'm explaining something, you can tell me if it doesn't make sense. So again, just like conversations versus written conversations, the face-to-face is a little bit, getting information a little bit faster than doing the written one. But not everybody can work this out. So you do have 2 options there, so you can find something that works for you. So be thinking about whether or not you are just going to submit it and take your rubric feedback, if you would like to request something written on your document only via Canvas, or you'd like to sign up for a face-to-face session. And then you will be reading your digital essay assignment. I've already had you read through it, but you're going to be reading through it again and answering some practice questions just to help us kind of be at least a little bit more clear. And again, you're welcome to post questions in the coffee shop for this. I am going to provide a lecture a little bit later, like an introduction next week during session 1 that actually walks you through this assignment sheet with samples and everything. This is just sort of a jumping off point. And that is it. Let me know if you have any questions, need any help with anything. I am doing drop-in hours during my office hours this week in case people just want to kind of stop in, or you can request an appointment or post in the coffee shop. Peace.